Now we get to the rise of Islam in 622. Now, the rise of Islam, it should be pretty obvious that this is going to have permanent and irreversible effects upon Christianity and upon the West, and indeed the whole world. It's going to become one of the major religions of the world. It emerges in the year 622 in the Arabian Peninsula, in a place now known as, well, was known then as Mecca, and now known as Mecca as well. But in 622, Muhammad had gotten into deep trouble in Mecca because of his views on God, on Allah. And so he was chased out of Mecca and he fled to Medina. And this event is known as the Hijra. And this is usually seen as the beginning of Islam. He goes to Medina, up in the north, about 150 miles away, and he stays there for the next 10 years of his life until he dies. But in that 10-year period, Islam is going to explode in its influence and so forth, okay? From his death in 632 up to 732, 100-year period, Islam is going to spread across about 4,500 miles of the planet, from the Straits of Gibraltar all the way up to the Indus River Valley. And all of that remains Islamic till this day, except for Israel, okay? And so Islam grows rapidly and is very tenacious in holding what it takes. Now, there is one place in the world we can say used to be Muslim, and that is Spain. Because in 711, the Muslims are going to cross the Strait of Gibraltar and go into Spain. Now, there was a kingdom there, the Visigothic kingdom. They were Christians. They had been converted by Gregory the Great, but the Visigothic kingdom was a fairly weak kingdom at this time. They were easily defeated, and the Muslims then, going up through the Iberian Peninsula, cross the Pyrenees Mountains and go up into what is present-day France. So they're deep in the heart of Western Europe now. And then there in 732, they were defeated at the Battle of Tours by Charles Martel. Now, it was more or less really just a large skirmish, but it was the high watermark of Islam in Western Europe at the time. They turned and went back down into Spain and stayed there. Over the next 700 years, a war will ensue, a struggle, a resistance will ensue between the Christians who were in Spain and the Muslims. And this is a period known as the Reconquest, or the Reconquista in Spanish. And it takes about 700 years for Islam to be pushed out of Spain. And that was completed in the year 1492 under Ferdinand and Isabella. And so that's one of the only places in the world that we can say used to be Islamic. Everywhere else they've ever taken, they have kept. Okay? So, anyway, let's go back to the beginning of Islam here and look at some of the things that take place. Now, Muhammad was kind of an orphan. He grew up with his uncle and was later on put to work in a caravan operation run by a woman named Khadijah. Khadijah was a widow who had inherited this caravan. She took a liking to the young man and saw that he had good education, and she began to promote him. Eventually, he and Khadijah will become romantically involved and marry. But while he's operating these caravans, he's going up into Egypt, into the Levant, and he interacts with other Christians up there in Egypt, and Byzantines, and Nestorians, and Jews, and so forth and so on. He gets to interact with all kinds of peoples. But when he comes back down into the Arabian Peninsula, what he sees is something that disturbs him. Now, he's an extremely intelligent guy, and he has some spiritual depth to him. And he begins to see that all the Arabic peoples are little tribes. They raise sheep and goats and so forth, but they fight with each other all the time, and so they never can really accomplish anything because these tribes are always fighting. And so he realizes that they need to be unified, But the only way they could be unified is if they stopped worshiping all the little gods that they worship. Each tribe had their own gods and goddesses. Now there was one thing that tied them together. Every year, these tribes would stop fighting and they would go to Mecca during a lunar month known as Ramadan, and they would observe and worship and venerate a fallen object from the sky. It was a meteorite. And that meteorite is now in the center of Mecca in that black cube. It's a little cubic temple. It's called the Kaaba. And so in the Kaaba is this meteorite. And so it's held to have fallen from the sky and been sent by the gods. So when Muhammad comes along teaching that everyone should worship one God and get rid of all these little deities and all these little gods and goddesses and so forth, the tribes didn't want to hear it. And so he met resistance. But eventually his ideas won out. And he is going to go on to found, like I said, one of the most powerful religions in the history of the world. Now, it's very simple. There are 5 pillars. You've probably heard this before, but the 5 pillars of Islam are one simply say the creed every day. It's a very simple creed. It says there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. And to convert, one only need to say that 3 times in a row. Okay? I won't say it more than once. But anyway, say the creed every day. Okay? Pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. So daily, Muslim to comply just must pray 5 times a day. Next, Muslim must give 2.5% of his earnings, or 1/40th of his earnings, yearly to a charity. Okay, far simpler to comply with than, say, the Jewish tithe or the Christian tithe. Okay, which is 1/10. Next, one must go on the Hajj at least once in their life. The Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca. And so if one has the means, one should go on the Hajj. Now, most Muslims today will probably don't have the means to go on the Hajj, but at least about 3 million people a year do go on the Hajj every year. Okay, so these are the pillars of Islam, and it is going to grow very fast and become a very influential form of religion. Like I said, it grows in a wave and covers 4,500 square miles, or 4,500 miles of the earth in a very short period of time, 100 years. We've not seen any other religion grow quite that fast. Okay. So they conquered Egypt, they conquered the Holy Land, Iraq, Iran, what is present-day Iraq and Iran, the old Persian Empire, and Asia Minor. Now, the only thing that stands in their way on the east is Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire. And so the Byzantine Empire is going to be under pressure, and it's going to be shrinking as the Turks, the Muslim Turks, put pressure on this Byzantine Empire. So they're coming in on the east over there through Constantinople. Meanwhile, over on the west, they're all the way up in Spain. And so Western Europe is kind of cut off and contained between these two. Meanwhile, all of North Africa was lost. So you can see this creates an enormous challenge for Christianity. So for 4 centuries, Europe would live between the eastern and the western front of Islam being hemmed in. And the Crusades were the first attempt and the first major response to try to respond to these heavy losses of nearly half of Christendom. Now, as we'll see, the Crusades were an epic failure, and all of the consequences of the Crusades that come out of that period, if there are any positive ones, they were not intended consequences, but some good things did come out of it.